So today is the 20th. Wow. I used to wear a watch that had the date on it, and I don't anymore, and it's like, so today is the 21st of September 2022. It is, I'm Rabbi Cantor. This is Congregation Beth in Yardley, Pennsylvania, and this is our class on Rabbinic stories. Okay. Does everyone have a, okay, good. So today we're going to talk about Rabbi Akiva, and I have two selections for you. One is from the Talmud, Ketubot 62b to 63a. We've talked about how that means that it's physically the backside of the 62nd page in the book, 61st page in the book, because it starts on page 2. Page 1 is the cover, and it continues on to the first side of the 62nd page of the book. Okay? That's what the A and the B is. Ketubot is the law of weddings. I'm going to tell you, Ketubot is called like the miniature Talmud because every topic is in there. Property law, everything, right? Because the rabbis are incapable of staying on topic. They're just, it is organized by flow of consciousness, and it's like, you know, this is how you acquire a wife. Oh, well, how do you acquire a slave? How do you acquire an animal? How do you acquire a house? How do you acquire China? How do you acquire this? You know, so-and-so had some China, and here's a story about it, and here's 2 more stories about him, and here's a story about someone else. It's like, it's just, okay. So, a little bit of Talmud. And then we have, on the second side here, from Avot de Rabbinic. Now, every bit of Talmud, as you know, is built upon a Mishnah, right? You've got the Mishnah, year 200, and then the Talmud, 400 or 600, right? Do I need to review that again? Okay, so just to remember our structure of Jewish narrative layers, you've got Mount Sinai, and you've got the oral law. Moses told it to Aaron. Aaron told it to Joshua. Joshua told it to the elders. The elders told it to the sages. The sages told it to their students. It's all, you know. And then Rome comes along and threatens the continued existence of the Jewish people. And so they think, you know, we better write this down because, like, there's only 5 of us left. You know, let's write this down. So it gets written down around the year 200. That's after the Jewish uprising, which, by the way, did not go well. The Mishnah gets written down. The Mishnah does not, but on the side, you know, I know Hanukkah's a big far away, but the Mishnah does not talk about Hanukkah as a great military victory, which is what it was. It just kind of avoids it completely. And the Talmud also avoids the military victory. It talks about the miracle of the oil, which the people who were at the victory and wrote a book about it that year forgot to mention. Spoiler alert. Okay, we'll come back to that later. Okay, and then they have discussions orally about the Mishnah, all these discussions, and then they write that down into the Talmud, and the Talmud is drawing on the oral discussions about the Mishnah. It's drawing on the Mishnah, and it's also drawing upon the Tosefta, which is written at the same time as the Mishnah, but wasn't as popular, so it didn't get canonized as the Mishnah. It's the Tosefta. And then all the other things that were talked about, but never got written down anywhere, but these guys remembered it. That's the Talmud. Okay? The Talmud weaves it all together. The format is, you have a section of Mishnah, then you have some Gemara on it, then you have another Mishnah, and then you have some Gemara on it. Okay? This section here about Rabbi Akiva is in Ketubot, and we're reading from a little slice of Gemara. Not every Mishnah gets the Gemara. So one of the differences between the Talmud of Israel, the Yerushalmi, and the Talmud of Babylon, the Bavli, is that the Yerushalmi has a lot to talk about all of the first section of the Mishnah, which is about agriculture, or first section of the Mishnah of the 6 orders, all about agriculture. It has brachot, and then it has seeds, and then it has all these other things. the Babylonian Talmud talks about blessings, and it has nothing to say about the rest of that first order, because it doesn't know agriculture, because they're in Babylon, and it's all about Israeli agriculture. Whereas the Israel Talmud has actually Talmud on all that agricultural stuff. Okay. One thing that the Talmud does not have a commentary on is Avot. Avot is one of the oldest strata of Mishnah. It's the sayings of the fathers. It is this practical advice. It starts out by saying, God gave the Torah to Moses at Sinai, Sinai taught it to... It's one that lists out the whole, and then it lists through the generation of who learned what from whom and what their favorite sayings were. There is no Gemara to the Avot. However, there is Avot the Rabbi Natan. And Avot the Rabbi Natan is kind of like a Gemara to Avot, but it didn't make it into the Talmud. So it's not Talmud, it's Avot the Rabbi Natan. But if you go on Sefaria.org, and you look at and you click on the Talmud hyperlink, it'll give you all the sections of the Talmud, and then below that it gives you Avot the Rabbi Natan and all the other stuff that didn't make it in either, because it's all from the generation layer of the Talmud. Okay? But the good news is none of this is actually necessary to follow along in today's class. This is all just background. I have this theory that if I just keep throwing the background at you, one of these days you're going to say, oh yeah, I know that. Who wants to read the first paragraph for us? Again, just to explain, the boldface is what the Talmud actually says, and the not boldface is the commentary that we're adding in between the words of the Talmud, so you have even a clue about what the Talmud is trying to say. Because the Talmud is cryptic. Why use 7 words when 2 would do? Even though it makes no sense unless you know what the 7 words are. Okay? So, who wants to read the first paragraph? Go right ahead.
Rabbi Akiva was the shepherd of Ben Kalba's Savua, one of the wealthy residents of Jerusalem.
Okay, you remember him? From last week. Ben Kalba Savua. Right? He was one of those 4 rich guys at the banquet, right? So he pops up again. So now we know, okay, this is around the same generation. Okay, keep going.
The daughter of Ben Kalba Savua saw that he was humble and refined. She said to him, if I betroth myself to you, will you go to the study hall to learn Torah? He said to her, yes. She became betrothed to him privately and sent him off to study. Her father heard of this and became angry. He moved her from his house and took a vow prohibiting her from benefiting from his property.
She married a nobody, sent him to school. Her dad has cut her off. By the way, you know the comic strip Blondie? Mm-hmm. You know how they're always looking at the
relatives?
The relatives are always looking at the picture of the relatives. Oh. They're always from his side of the family. Because, I've been told, if you go back far enough in the comics, Dagwood and Blondie are dating, and she's from a wealthy family and he isn't, and they get married and she gets cut off. And that's why there are no relatives on Blondie's side of the family in the story.
They must have been Jewish, hadn't they?
They were reading the story Rabbi Akiva.
Was the creator Jewish?
Mort Walker? I don't know. Anyways, go on. Please, the second paragraph.
Oh, Rabbi Akiva went and sat for 12 years in the study hall. When he came back to his house, he brought 12,000 students with him, and as he approached, he heard an old man saying to his wife, "For how long will you lead the life of a widow of a living man, living alone while your husband is in another place?"
Okay, I need to assign some nouns to the pronouns. It's Akiva's wife who's being spoken to, and the person is saying to Akiva's wife, how long will you be a living widow? You sent your husband away, just in case it wasn't clear, because they don't believe in nouns either. Okay, they believe in pronouns. Okay, go on.
Okay. She said to him, if he would listen to me, he would sit and study for another 12 years. When Rabbi Akiva heard this, he said, I have permission to do this.
Okay. Do not behave this way in real life. Okay? This is, don't do this. Okay? But, it's like, yeah, I want a postdoc. Sure. Okay.
He went back and sat for another 12 years in the study hall. When he came back, he brought 24,000 students with him. His wife heard and went out toward him to greet him. Her neighbors said, borrow some clothes and wear them, as your current apparel is not appropriate to meet an important person. She said to them, a righteous man understands the life of his beast.
Okay.
She's comparing herself to a beast.
Men are writing the story, okay? Men are writing the story. But what she's saying is, I'm going to have to make myself nice for him. He's my husband. He loves me. Okay? My wife doesn't wear makeup. Why? Because she knows whether she wears makeup or doesn't wear makeup. I can't tell the difference, so why bother? I always think she's beautiful. Right? Okay? So I think that's what they're trying to say. Like, it's like, I don't need to attract him.
Mhm.
He's mine. Okay? Okay.
But I
Yep,
noticed
yep.
one difference.
Yep.
He comes back, he goes away for the 12 years, he comes back with more students, and all of a sudden, he's an important person.
Oh,
We
yeah.
need to get dressed to honor this important.
Right.
12 years ago, you're living like a widow, what's wrong with you? And now it's,
Mhm.
hey, he's real important.
Yeah.
So what's
Now,
going on?
I think it was really important when he came back with 12,000 students, but he didn't get far enough into town for anyone to notice. I don't know. That's a really good point, right? Well, I think 12,000 students would be very impressive too. I mean, this is,
She referred to herself as a beast.
well, she's referring to that's what Proverbs says, okay? She's working with it. She's a scholar. At least she's quoting verses. Okay.
When she came to him, she fell on her face and kissed his feet. His attendants pushed her away, and they did not know who she was. And he said to them, leave her alone, as my Torah knowledge and yours is actually hers.
Okay, credit where credit is due. Number one, who is the strange woman in rags grabbing onto his feet? Get rid of it? No. This is the woman who made all of this possible. Okay? So he's not saying I learned this. He's saying she made this happen. Right?
Behind every successful man, there's a woman.
Behind every successful man is a surprised woman, yes. Isn't that how it goes? What? No, what?
No, you can.
Please.
No.
Okay.
In the meantime, her father heard that a great man came to the town. He said, I will go to him. Maybe he will nullify my vow, and I will be able to support my daughter.
Okay, so he's got regret. It's 24 years, he hasn't been supporting his daughter. He says, I need someone to, putter this vow for me. I need to get this vow forgiven and absolved so that I can go back into relationship with my daughter.
But does he know that the rabbi is
No, he has
the
no
husband?
clue. He has no clue.
Oh,
It's just a strange rabbi. Look, he hasn't seen the son-in-law in 24 years. If he hasn't seen last time he saw the son-in-law, he was, this semi-nameless shepherd working for him, right? He wasn't this guy leading 24,000 people.
uh-huh.
And how big is this town anyways? That can support, where is he gonna put these 24,000 people overnight? Okay? Yes, no, he doesn't know.
It's the migrants of the day.
He came to him to ask about nullifying his vow, and Rabbi Akiva said to him, did you vow thinking that this Akiva would become a great man?
Okay, who is he reminding us of right here? What's he doing? What trope is he repeating that we know from earlier stories in the Bible? Who does this to other people? Yes, this is like Joseph and his brothers. Oh, let's see how you would behave, right? Did you know when you sent him away that he'd become a great man? Did you ever suspect that was possible?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
He said to him, if I had believed he would know even one chapter or even one halakha, I would not have been so harsh.
Okay, Is he-
I'm not following his.
okay, so
analysis.
halakha is a one law, right? If he had known one chapter of the Bible, or just one rule from rabbinics, it would have been enough, right? It's like, I really regret this. I thought he was an ignoramus. I thought he knew nothing. But, I really regret this. It's like, I should have thought, everyone knows something. He's got. real
So he
pain
knows
here.
at this point that it's his son-in-law?
No,
Or, no.
no, he doesn't.
Well,
He will in 5 words.
he said to him, I am he. Ben Kava Savua fell on his face and kissed his feet and gave him half of his money.
Okay, great.
And he got his daughter back, I assume.
Right.
All's well.
Now, there's one more line from that segment of the Gemara, and I edited it out, and I feel badly about editing it out, and I want to bring it back in. So I'm just going to read it to you. Here's how it continues. The Gemara relates, Rabbi Akiva's daughter did the same thing for Ben Azai. Rabbi Akiva's daughter sent her husband Ben Azai away for 24 years, right? Who was also a simple person, and she caused him to learn Torah in a similar way by betrothing herself to him and sending him off to study. This explains the folk saying that people say, the ewe follows the ewe, E-W-E. The daughter's actions are the same as the mother's, which means the Gemara is putting the spin on it to say, hey, this is praiseworthy. What do you think of that?
So you should go send your spouse off like mother, like daughter.
Right, and this notion of Torah learning, I mean, what's not being said in this story with these time frames?
The name of the person? I mean, the woman's name is not even mentioned.
Oh, it gets mentioned in other stories. Well, we'll come to her.
When did they have time to have a daughter? I mean, he's been away.
I mean, you get married, you go away for 24 years, hello, there's a window of opportunity, and I think you missed it. Okay? My wife had our last child when she was 34, and she was a, quote, geriatric mother.
It's not true anymore. Now they start at 39 and go to 50.
But she was geriatric.
Who
This
said
was
that she was geriatric?
The hospital system,
Yeah.
the doctors.
The doctor said
Yes,
you
she was a
should not have
geriatric
any more
patient.
children.
No, because she was so old having children, 35, oh my God. It's a miracle. So there's a lot of problems with this story.
Mhm.
Like, where does he get his kids from? Did he never come home to visit?
Those are just details.
So these are just details as to the realism of this story. Okay? Let's continue a little further. So this is from Avodah Rabbi Natan, and it says, okay, you're starting the story with Akiva. He's a shepherd, but there's got to be more to this story. There's got to be more to the story. Not more of the story that gets into the Talmud. They don't care. But somebody cared, and they wrote down. And here's okay. Let's wind it back and figure out, where is this Rabbi Akiva coming from? Okay.
What were the origins of Rabbi Akiva? They say that he was 40 years old and had still not learned anything. Once he was standing at the mouth of a well and he said, "Who carved a hole in the stone?" They said to him, "It is from the water, which constantly falls on it day after day." And they said, "Akiva, don't you know this from the verse Job 14:19? Water erodes stones."
Okay. What's happening in the story?
Well, he's spent quite a lot of his life, and especially then, he's 40.
Yeah.
He hasn't learned anything.
Yeah.
And he's demonstrating that he hasn't because he doesn't know something from, the verse.
Right.
He really doesn't know very much.
Right.
And he's older for
Right.
that time.
But he's going to learn something out of this story, because they're not bringing this story of the water for nothing, because they've, ink is precious. They're not going to waste any time.
But he's also a shepherd for 40 years.
Mhm.
He's had worldly experiences and might have witnessed water eroding stone.
Right. But he hadn't put two and two together before. Like Akiva, like, come on. The water erodes the stone. Well, he gets this great insight out of this, okay?
Rabbi Akiva immediately applied this all the more so to himself. He said, if something soft can carve something hard, then all the more so the words of the Torah, which are like steel, can engrave themselves on my heart, which is but flesh and blood. He immediately went to start studying Torah.
Okay. Even my thick head can learn something if you give it to me a dribble at a time. Okay? It's possible. Okay? In this version of this, okay, in this version of this, he's already got a kid. So this may be a totally different version where maybe he has a first wife, maybe not, we're not sure, right? So how does he go about this?
He went with his son and they sat down by the school teachers. He said to one, Rabbi, teach me Torah. He then took hold of one end of the tablet and his son took hold of the other end. The teacher wrote down Aleph and Bet for him and he learned them. Aleph to Tov, and he learned them. The book of Leviticus, and he learned it. And he went on studying until he learned the whole Torah.
Okay? The image of this grown man sitting in the kindergarten room learning the ABCs. Of course, he's going to progress faster than his son will. But we've seen this trope. We've seen things like this in other literature, right? This notion of going to the children's classroom and learning and then catching up, right? Okay. So, what happens?
Then he went and sat before Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Joshua.
Okay, remember, which Eliezer is this? Eliezer from last week, okay? And Rabbi Joshua, who are the two students who carry the coffin of Yochanan ben Zakkai out of Jerusalem, okay?
My masters, he said, open up the sense of the Mishnah to me. When they told him one law, he went off and sat down to work it out for himself.
Okay, so here's what's special about Akiva, right? The story about Rabbi Akiva, which is not told right here, is there's another story, which I'm probably not going to tell you. So I'm going to tell it to you now. Moses is on the mountain and he wants to see the promised land, and God wants to know the promised land. But God says, I'll show you a vision of the future. And so he takes Moses and he takes him to the classroom of Rabbi Akiva. Actually, let me rephrase. I'm telling it wrong. Moses is writing down the Torah. Moses is on the mountain with God, right? Way earlier. And God's writing down the Torah. And God's writing down the Torah, here's a shin. Because that's how a shin's written in the Torah, right? It's got these jots and tittles, which apparently is what they're called. Jots and tittles. They got like these little crowns. Certain letters have crowns. And Moses says, God, why are you putting little crowns on the letters? And God says, Moses, someday there's going to be a teacher called Rabbi Akiva. And from each jot and tittle, he is going to create mounds and mounds of new Torah, mountains of Torah, out of just interpreting those things. So Moses says, take me to his classroom. He goes to the classroom, and Moses is sitting in the back row, and Moses has no clue, can't follow what Akiva is saying, until Akiva says, and all of this we have as a Torah, Moshe Sinai, a Torah from Moses at Sinai. And then he's comforted, okay, because his tradition has led to all this, okay? So this is Akiva. Akiva is the person who doesn't just read the letters. Akiva wants to work it out for himself, right?
Rabbi Akiva is not contemporary with Moses.
No, there's a vision of the future. But no, he's granted a vision of the far future, right?
But you said Moses sat in the back and.
In the vision,
Oh, in
in the vision he goes, right, transported time. It's a just work with things, a vision, okay? But the thing is, we all know, if you want to learn something, right? If you want to memorize a list of names, what do?
Right across.
Study it.
You write it down,
You repeat it.
you repeat it, but also you manipulate it. Let me do it alphabetically. Let me do it alphabetically by the second letter in each line. Let me do it alphabetically by the third name. Let me write it out based upon geography. Let me write it out based upon relative ages. If you really manipulate the data like that, you know it backwards and forwards, right? I can teach you, 4 plus 4 is, 8. But if you say, okay, look, if you draw that visually, you understand it differently. And if you put these two over here, you understand, aha, that's 1 short of 9. And 9's a square, isn't it? Okay? So he's applying his mind, right? Sorry for the interruption. Keep going.
Why would this Aleph? What was it written for? This Bet, what was it written for? Why was this thing said? He kept coming back and kept asking them until he reduced his teachers to silence. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar said, "I will give you a parable to tell you what this was like a stonecutter who was hacking away at the mountains. One time he took his pickaxe in his hand and went and sat on top of the mountain and began to chip small stones away from it. Some people came by and asked him, what are you doing? He said to them, I am going to uproot the mountain and throw it into the Jordan. They said to him, you cannot uproot the entire mountain. But he kept hacking away until it became a big boulder. So he wedged himself underneath it, pried it loose, threw it into the Jordan. He said to it, your place is not here, but there. This is what Rabbi Akiva did to Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Tarfon.
Okay, so what's he doing to Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Tarfon?
Wow.
I was asking questions. No, what?
He's asking questions, he's chipping away and chipping away and chipping away until he's got a boulder and he can move the entire boulder.
And he says he's asking them to look at something different or
Right,
change their
right.
understanding
What's
of
going to happen to
something.
them?
And they're transformed in some way?
Yeah, read on.
Rabbi Tarfon said to him, Akiva, it is about you that the verse says, he stops up the streams so that the hidden things may be brought to light. For Akiva has brought to light things which are kept hidden from human beings.
Right, he opens everyone's eyes. He puts up light bulbs. He makes light bulbs go on around him. Okay.
So for someone who hasn't studied
Uh-huh.
and had spent so much of his life without doing that, he really has a transforming effect on other
Right.
people.
Right. And if we want to look at this psychologically, someone who comes to learning later in life comes at it very differently than someone who's learning when they're young, right? If you go to the law school and you find, there's all the young pups who are, 21, 22, they're in law school. And then there's like this guy who's 40 years old, who's coming out from like an accounting background or whatever, and goes to law school. That's the one who's going to be the gold medalist, okay? That's the student you want to watch because they're coming at it as an adult with very different eyes and a very different attitude towards learning, and they're going to have experiences that are going to resonate that these kids haven't lived long enough to have, right? So this is kind of a praise of, learning things as an adult as well. It's not suggesting that we should keep our kids ignorant and then, but this is putting a lot of praise on the person who wants to keep learning, the lifelong learner.
Okay.
Okay.
Every day he would bring a bundle of sticks, half of which he would sell to support himself and half he would use for kindling. His neighbors came to him and said, Akiva, you are choking us with all this smoke. Sell it all to us instead, and then buy oil with the money and study by the light of a candle. He said to them, but I take care of many of my needs with it. I study by its light, I warm myself by its fire, and then I can make it into a bed and sleep on it.
Okay? Practical guy. Nutty. Okay? Nutty, but practical. Right? Just, you gotta appreciate, he's very efficient. This is not the same Akiva the shepherd. Okay?
Maybe
This is
things
this
have
is a-
transformed him.
This is
since
a
then.
different version of the story. He's not away for 23. He's already got a wife. Right? He's learning. And she hasn't disappeared. Okay?
But we do know it's the same Akiva.
It's the same Akiva. Okay? Because what you have is you have a indeterminacy of belief. So something is indeterminate. That's like Schrodinger's cat, right? Or not like the fire, or not like the smoke over the hill. But so, for example, we can tell a midrash about Isaac. Okay, you know Isaac. Isaac's offered up as a sacrifice. Question: did Isaac know what was going to happen, or did Isaac know what was going to happen? If he didn't know what was going to happen, then that's one telling of the story. If he did know what was going to happen, that's a different telling of the story. Rashi, in his comment on those verses, gives two versions. In version number 1, Isaac had no idea this was coming. In version number 2, when Isaac is circumcised at age 2, or at 8 days, Ishmael at 13 says to him, "Hey, you're just giving up this little tiny scrap. For me, it was major surgery. I mean, for you, it was just, a home procedure. Me, I was like, this was like a daytime, surgery for me with circumcision." And Isaac says, even if they would take my life, I would do it. Okay? So, indeterminate. We're allowed to believe different things that are totally inconsistent with each other, even at the same time. It's just, if we're telling it this way, we have to go with the conclusions of this version of the story. If we're telling it this way, go with those conclusions of the story, right? And we do that with our histories and stories and our mythology, right? There's a brilliant book, which I borrowed from the library, and then I bought it because I want to read it again. And then I lent it to someone, and they never gave it back. And then I bought it again, and now I have it on Kindle, but I really want to buy it again. Called The Marriage of Cadmus and Harmony by Umberto Cassuto.
Who?
Umberto Cassuto. It's a telling of the Greek mythology, noting that there's only 3 generations of Greek heroes. I mean, it goes from Cadmus and Harmony's wedding to, like, the end of the heroes very quickly. It's only 3 generations. But he starts out and he's telling the story of Europa. And Europa is this woman who is stolen away by Zeus in the form of a cow from Asia to, guess where? Europe. That's why she's Europa. He tells the story. And he says, but wait a minute, that's not how it happened. And he tells the story a different way. He says, no, that's not how it tells it different. He tells it like 5 different versions of how the story starts. And they're all true. They're just not consistent with each other. So too the Talmud. They got a lot of stories to tell, and hey, this is from Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. He doesn't have to be consistent with the Talmud. So let's not worry about it. Okay, keep going.
Okay. All the poor will one day be judged against Rabbi Akiva. For it is one says to them, "Why did you never study?" And they say, "Because we were poor." Then he will say to them, "But wasn't Rabbi Akiva even poorer, completely impoverished?" And if they say, "It is because of our babies," we will say, "But didn't Rabbi Akiva have sons and daughters as well?"
Keep going.
In the meantime, her father heard the great man came to.
Well, no, you have to flip the page.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But they will say, it is because he merited to have his wife Rachel to help him.
Oh, now we've got a wife, Rachel. And guess what? She didn't send him away. She's helping him, right?
And he has sons and daughters.
She's got sons and daughters. And he's got, an ability to get things done. And he doesn't have 24,000 students, right? Because, look, in the story I'm telling about Rabbi Akiva, that I told earlier to the first class, right? Where he's encountering the dead person, they're speaking Aramaic. Akiva didn't speak Aramaic. He wasn't of that generation. Okay, so he's a flexible character.
Okay, he was 40 years old when he went to study Torah, and after 13 years he was teaching Torah to the masses. It was said that he did not leave the world until he had tables full of silver and gold, and he could go up to his bed on golden ladders. His wife would go out in a fancy gown and with golden jewelry and with an engraving of Jerusalem on it. His students said, "Rabbi, you are embarrassing us with what you have done for her." He said to them, "She suffered greatly with me for the sake of Torah."
Okay? So,
But how could he get all these riches? I mean, from the students, from the teachers?
well, I guess. Now, by the way, we may come to this story later, we may not. How does Akiva meet his end?
How does say?
Akiva, how does Akiva meet his end?
Oh, was that with the Rome and?
Yeah, but he's
And all the
executed by the
rabbis.
Romans. Yeah. So there's more to the story. I would hate to have to write a biography of Akiva based upon the materials there, because it's like, how do you harmonize it? Although there's some really great novelizations of Akiva's life that are particularly well written. But you're embarrassing us with what you've done for her. How's that embarrassing? Putting her in gold and riches and jewelry and a Jerusalem of gold.
If they can't do that for their wives or something.
Maybe.
Maybe they thought she should be modest or something. Maybe there's modesty.
Because remember, the wife of Akiva, how's Ben Kalbasavu's daughter, how's she dressed? When she comes to meet him with his 24,000 students.
Oh, plain.
In rags! Right? And here, she's not in rags. She's like the queen. Allah Shalom. But much more fashionable.
Without a purse.
It has been said that the Queen has always been at the cutting edge of fashion for 1952. Okay, we should not speak ill of the dead. What do you think of these stories?
The story about him when he goes to school and he asks his teachers questions and he keeps asking them more and more questions until they give up and they go silent. It reminds me of like when a 3-year-old child asks you a question, you give them as simple an answer as you can and then they say why, and then you have to give them further explanation. They say why about that. So it never ends.
Learning never ends.
By the way, when I left Long Beach, they threw a party for me. It was very nice. And they had an open mic, which is always dangerous. And my children came and they spoke at this open mic. And what my daughter said, and my sons as well, but what my daughter said really touched me. She said, I never spoke down to them when they had questions. I always treated them as if they were an intelligent equal. And it's true, when my kids said, why is the sky blue? I'd say, well, there is like little particles of air and the light goes through them and they refract a certain wavelength, and the blue light gets caught and reflected in, and the red light keeps going. And they said, oh. They didn't ask why. And if they asked why, I'd say, I don't know, that's just how it works. Right? I was really good at saying, I don't know, that's just how it works. But I always gave them as detailed as much as I could, right? It's like when I teach the Aleph Bet, right? Who here was taught the Aleph is a silent letter? Okay, the Aleph is not a silent letter. Okay, it's sometimes silent, okay? In the word lo, it's a silent letter. And, sorry, lo, it's a silent letter. The Aleph is there to tell you that it's an O sound. It's a silent letter. But in oh hell, it's not a silent letter, because you just heard me say at the beginning, oh hell, right? Tent. There, it's got a vowel, oh. So,
But the sound comes from the vowel, not from the aleph.
no. If the sound just came from the vowel, it would be oh hell. It's not oh hell, it's oh hell. You hear that? Right? Remember, who here was in choir and had to sing, and they say, okay guys, sing ah, and you go ah, and say no, I don't want to hear that vocal glottal stop, the ah, I want to hear oh, because like it's like, you know, it's got a sound. It's not a silent letter, it's a right? But we dumb it down, because who wants to explain a glottal stop? Right? But whenever I teach the Aleph Bet, the is a right? Uvid, right? I'm very careful about dumbing things down, because you know what happens if you dumb things down for children? They never explore the full version, right? So you gotta plant the seeds. They might not understand it now, but the seeds are there for them to understand later on, right? And then, you know, later on they'll get the insight. And I feel like, I guess this is an aside or a tirade, I feel that we've dumbed down Judaism so much, you know, to make it palatable for children, that the adults that we have are living pediatric Judaism. Right? Because, and, you know, I mean, that's why I have a course coming up where it's like, you know, Torah school for adults, right? Because you can't teach the kids about sex and about death. Although 100 years ago you could teach kids about death, right? Every nursery rhyme ever. Every nursery rhyme ever. If you pick up a children's storybook, class textbook from 100 years ago, somebody dies on every page, and they're kids, okay? People are dying left, right, and center. And we didn't worry about, oh my goodness, we're gonna scar the kids. Do you know why? Because death was a part of life. Life expectancy. Everybody who was 5 years old knew someone younger than them who had died. And that's when they grew up. And we've extended childhood. I have no idea why we're on this digression. It must be my rabbinic training. We've extended that childhood innocent stage to 18 and beyond. And now we've got kids going to college who are still kids. And you got, I just read a news article. I'm really off topic now. I read a news article about a university coming to an agreement with the family of a kid who drank himself to death as part of a hazing ritual. And like the charges were dropped against 5 of the kids involved, and the other 6, their punishment is they have to go around the country with the father and appear on, like, you know, town hall things and to explain the impact of this, right? But I have to say to myself, and I think I'm being unkind, perhaps, this kid didn't know anything about alcohol. He didn't know that you can die from drinking too much alcohol, because nobody taught him how to drink.
But they weren't doing normal drinking. They were dozens.
No, they gave him a bottle, and they said, drink it.
but they knew it would have some effect, a bad effect.
He didn't know.
He didn't know.
He
didn't
obviously
know.
did.
He was
Oh, the victim
the
didn't know.
victim, right? He doesn't know.
That's what he's saying.
No, but he was pressured to do it. It didn't
Even
matter if
then,
he knew or
like
didn't
even
know.
then, no, trust me. So I grew up, my parents always had alcohol with dinner. Let me rephrase, they had alcohol before dinner, they had alcohol with dinner, and then alcohol after dinner. When I was in my therapy course, and we were learning about addiction, I asked the professor, are my parents alcoholics? And he said, no, because they're not sitting all day dreaming about it. If they miss it, they don't go back and catch up. If they're out, they're out. It's just, they're culturally drinking, right? And if we as kids wanted to try, I said, sure, try it. Because 5 years old, 8-year-old, it's terrible. It's the most disgusting stuff in the world. None of my siblings drink, per se, right? But we all know about the dangers of alcohol. So if I, had gone to a frat thing or whatever, this here, drink this bottle, I'd say, are you crazy? That could kill me.
Have you been following the banned book?
Oh my goodness. Let's just ban any. So this is being recorded. So
Speaking of that,
no, it's fine.
can I ask a question about
Yeah.
what we read?
Yeah,
So there are two things that sort of set off the light bulb again. One is the age at which Rabbi Akiva starts learning is 40.
Mhm.
Is that related to the, in theory, not studying Kabbalah until you're 40?
Could be. 40 is like old age.
Okay, okay.
I mean, 40 is a generation, right? How old is Moses when he's at the burning bush?
40-ish.
40.
The second question is that it talks about Rabbi Akiva studying Leviticus.
Mhm.
And I think I've been told that in the Orthodox world, or when you're first starting to study Torah, you start with Leviticus.
Mhm.
Is that the same issue? I'm not issue, but
Yeah,
same.
yeah, and actually there's a beautiful teaching on that which I want to share. So my friend Rabbi Fred Nebel was a rabbi in Bangor when I was in Bangor. And we studied together every morning, so I learned a lot of stories from him. And when he was teaching in schools, he said there were two choices. Either the kids started learning Leviticus, which is all laws and stuff, not terribly interesting, or you start with Genesis, and that's all the great stories. He says, as a principle, when you've got the kid coming into your office because they've been behaving selfishly, odds are that's a kid who started with Genesis and not a kid who started with Leviticus. Because Leviticus is all, you have an obligation to this. If your enemy has a donkey that's fallen down, lift up the donkey, right? Don't put a stumbling block before the blind. It's all of these laws, but it's all these laws about your obligation to what we owe each other. Okay? Leviticus is all what we owe each other. And Genesis is all, I'm the center of the story, right? It's all about Adam. And Cain and Abel's like, no, I want to be more important. And with Abraham, right? And Isaac, they're all fighting for, it's all, I am the most important thing. I'm the most important thing. I'm the chosen one, right? And the kids who learn those stories first aren't necessarily thinking about their obligations to others first. And that was just his casual observation. I mean, he didn't do a study. I mean, there's no, it's not, I mean, you could verify it, I suppose, I don't know. But one of the things I say about the difference between the United States of America and the Jewish people is the difference between the Bill of Rights, 10 rights, and the Ser HaDibrot, the 10 sayings, the 10 commandments. Both of them protect your right to life. The Bill of Rights protects your right to life by saying you have the right to life, right? Or the Declaration of Independence, you know? The Torah protects your right to life by saying you can't murder anyone. Declaration of Independence, you have the right to property. Aseret HaDibrot, don't steal. If everyone is obligated not to steal, everyone's property right is saved. And if everyone's obligated not to murder, everyone's life is protected. But if I just say you have a right to life, you might forget that in order for that right to life to be meaningful, you have an obligation not to take lives from others. And in order for that right to property to be meaningful, you have to have an obligation not to take the property of others. It's packaging, right? It's packaging. Every right is built upon an obligation. If you focus on the obligation, the rights follow automatically. If you focus on the rights, you need to also tell them about the obligation. You got to teach them about both. Here, you don't have to teach anyone about their rights. Just teach them their obligations. The rights will take care of themselves. And we live in a society where it's all focused on my rights. Right? Right? Entitlements. And, you know, do you have a right to life, or do you have an obligation to care for each other? That's a totally different one. I will actually be on a panel that's talking about Jewish law and reproductive health. That's being offered through Kolomet, and that's a panel of 3 rabbis. I'm devastated to say that they decided to have it online only and not in person because they were afraid of who might come to disrupt. And they were afraid of violence. And that really saddens me profoundly.
They're afraid, what was the second afraid?
They're afraid of violence.
Of violence.
They're afraid that, it won't be safe. And that just kills me. We are a society that can't talk to each other anymore.
That's a very good point that you made, and unfortunately, on college campuses now, wearing your K-pop is dangerous. That in America, where they come. And people started telling me, I thought maybe they're imagining it. Then I'm reading news stories. Simply because you support Israel, you have to denounce it if you're Jewish in order for them to accept you. And how could you do that if it's in your Bible, it's in your faith?
So it has to do with signaling. If you believe A, then odds are you probably believe B, C, D, E, and F, right? And A doesn't bother me, but the fact that F you believe, okay, that bothers me. So I get very suspicious if you believe A. And people are being put into these clusters of truth values. And they're inconsistent with each other. And not that I want to spoil my Rosh Hashanah sermon yet again, but there's 2 primary problems that are affecting America. See, this is, okay, we're totally off topic. I own that. Do you want me to get back on topic?
No.
Okay. The problem number 1 is we no longer believe that option A and option B are both alternative solutions to the same problem, and A would work on its own and B would work on its own, but we think A is better and you think B is better. We now think that there's option A and option B, and if I believe in option A, I believe that the people behind option B are not proposing it as a solution, but actually they want to destroy America. And the people who believe B will say if the people who want option A, that's not a solution set, that's actually their intention is to destroy America. And there are people who believe that those people are running for Congress or the city or whatever because they want to destroy America. And they've completely lost the logical point of it is so insanely inconvenient to run for government. Anyone who wants to destroy a system would not have the patience to do that way. And then we see people destroying America and think, well, maybe they do have the patience. I don't know. That's problem number one is it's my way or no way. And problem number two is we don't know how to talk to each other and listen, right? Again, spoil my sermon, but you still enjoy it when you hear it because it'll be much more, feel it out. Is every conversation we have with someone who disagrees with us, what's our main motivation in that conversation? What are we trying to do? Convince the other. When's the last time you ever convinced anyone of anything? Big waste of your time. The goal of any conversation should be to understand the other and to be understood. I'm not trying to convince you. I'm just trying to explain to you why my version of reality is plausible.
And I would just add, show respect for one another with the differing
Yep.
views.
Yep.
As you're talking, I'm just thinking of
Yep.
two friends I know
Mhm.
who have differing views, and they have always been very respectful of one another, and
Mhm.
I just like them for that,
Yep.
you know.
So you guys don't have to go to Rosh Hashanah and you don't get it.
They see families sitting at dinner
Yeah.
at a restaurant or something, they're each one, kids and adults, are on the,
That's a different disease.
and I say to them, are they texting each other? Because they're not talking to each other. And I've actually seen where a kid was, had to read a book or something and couldn't use his phone until after dessert.
Yeah.
And I complimented the family.
If my kid's watching TV with me, I want them to not be on their phone while they watch TV. I want you to pay attention. Okay? If we're watching The Godfather, I want you to pay attention to The Godfather. I know it's from an age where, if The Godfather was made today, it would be an hour. Hour and a half tops. But no, back then they just had more time to just drag things
Where
out.
can you see The Godfather? Was it on Netflix or something?
I rented it.
Okay,
Oh, you rented it.
I rented it on Amazon. No, actually, it might have been, or it might have been on Netflix that particular time. I mean, they rotate on, they rotate off.
I keep trying to find it again. I can't find
every
it.
movie that's been made is
It's on
on the internet.
AMC.
You might have to pay to see it.
Yeah, AMC.
Just do a
Or
search.
it could have been HBO.
Well, you might have to, most of that you might have to.
Thank you so much, everyone, for
Thank you.
And we're gonna be
tolerating
back
my
next week,
my
next
whimsy.
Wednesday.
That's right.
next Wednesday indeed.
Both courses next
Yep.
Wednesday. All right.
Pictures in the